Okay, so this week you've given us a pretty interesting stack of sources,
Yeah.
really all kind of circling around this question that I know is really on the minds of a lot of people in education,
Right.
and maybe even beyond education. Just how much does a teacher's personality
Yeah.
play a role in whether they experience burnout?
That's a big one.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think our mission in this deep dive is to really get to the heart of this
Absolutely.
meta-analysis
Sure.
that you've provided.
Yes.
And just so people know, a meta-analysis, it's like a study of studies.
That's it.
So it's taking a whole bunch of research and crunching the numbers all together to see what the bigger picture is.
Exactly.
So this one looked at 18 different studies
Wow.
with over 4,700 teachers
That's a lot.
to see what that connection is between personality and burnout.
Yeah, it's such a vital area to understand, too, because teacher burnout has a real ripple effect. It's not just about the teachers themselves feeling exhausted. It impacts their motivation, their performance in the classroom, even their own health. And then, crucially, it can affect their students, their learning, their motivation. And, we're talking about a significant portion of the profession here.
Yeah, definitely.
Something like 30 to 40% of teachers experience at least some burnout symptoms.
Right. Yeah, so it's not a small problem.
Yeah.
Okay, so just so we're all on the same page here at this study, and a lot of the work on burnout breaks it down into these three parts.
Right.
Three kind of key dimensions. So the first one is what they call emotional exhaustion.
Right.
And that's basically that feeling of being completely drained, like you've got nothing left to give.
Exactly. Yeah, just white bag.
You're just running on empty.
Yeah. And then there's depersonalization. And this is where a teacher might start to feel more negative, more cynical, more distant towards the people they're working with every day, students, colleagues, even the parents.
Right.
It's like a way of protecting themselves, creating some emotional space when they're feeling so overwhelmed. But it's not a healthy long-term coping strategy.
No, not at all. Okay, so that's two. And then the third piece of this burnout puzzle is what they call reduced personal accomplishment. And this is that really disheartening sense that you're not making a difference, that lack of confidence in your own abilities, and the impact you're having in the classroom.
Right.
Okay, so we've got these three dimensions of burnout. And what this meta-analysis did was look at how they connect to these things called the big five personality traits,
Oh, yeah.
which you've probably heard of. Things like how prone someone is to worry,
Right.
how outgoing they are, their openness to new experiences, how agreeable they are, and how organized and responsible they are, all that good stuff. And what's cool about this particular meta-analysis is that it zeroed in on teachers
Okay.
specifically.
Interesting.
A lot of the other research on burnout has looked at all sorts of professions.
Yeah.
And I think this focus on teachers is really key because teaching has its own very particular set of challenges.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, just the constant interpersonal interactions, the
Yeah.
emotional labor involved, it's
Yeah.
really unique.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get into what this meta-analysis actually found.
Okay.
So overall, what they saw was that there are significant connections.
Yeah.
Generally, they're small to medium in size
Gotcha.
between these three aspects of burnout and those big five personality traits.
Right.
But, and this was interesting right off the bat, there's one exception that we should point out. Openness to experience did not show a significant link
Okay.
with emotional exhaustion.
Interesting.
Okay,
Oh,
yeah.
that is fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll come back to that.
Okay. We'll definitely come back to that. But let's start with neuroticism. So this trait, which is all about a tendency towards anxiety, worry, irritability, that kind of stuff, showed a positive link with all three dimensions of burnout.
Okay, and that was a pretty strong link, right?
It was, yeah. In fact, the study pointed out that neuroticism had the strongest positive connection with emotional exhaustion. They called it a medium effect size.
Now, when we talk about these effect sizes, small, medium,
Right.
you can think of that as the strength of the connection, right?
Exactly.
So the medium effect size is something that's really noticeable. It's a
Yeah.
pretty substantial link.
Yeah.
So it also had, neuroticism, a nearly medium effect size
Oh, wow.
with depersonalization and a smaller but still significant medium effect size with that feeling of reduced personal accomplishment.
Okay, so that's across the board then with neuroticism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So why might it be that someone who's more prone to anxiety or worry is more likely to experience burnout in all these areas?
Well, the study really highlights an important point here. Teachers who score higher in neuroticism, they might tend to view those normal stressors of the job, like having to manage a busy classroom, dealing with challenging interactions, all that in a much more negative light.
Right, right.
So those everyday bumps in the road,
Yeah,
they might actually feel much more overwhelming,
yeah,
much more emotionally draining for them.
right,
And that would feed directly into that emotional exhaustion.
right, yeah, yeah.
And that more negative way of seeing things can also feed into that feeling of detachment, the depersonalization, as a way to kind of protect themselves from all these perceived threats. And then, when things don't go perfectly, someone high in neuroticism, they might be more likely to blame themselves, feel like they've failed, which obviously feeds into that sense of reduced personal accomplishment.
Right, so it's not just the workload, but it's almost their perception of the
Yeah.
workload, and then that feeds into this cycle.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so let's flip the script a little bit.
Right.
What about extroversion? That tendency to be, energetic and talkative, enthusiastic.
Right. Well, the meta-analysis actually found a negative relationship between extroversion and all three burnout dimensions. So this suggests that teachers who are more outgoing and who enjoy social interaction, they actually tend to experience less burnout.
Okay, and the strongest negative connection here was with reduced personal accomplishment, right?
That's right, a medium effect size.
And it also had smaller negative correlations with emotional exhaustion
Yeah.
and depersonalization.
Hmm.
So what's going on here? Why does being more extroverted seem to offer some sort of protection against burnout?
Well, there are a couple of likely reasons. The study suggests that more extroverted teachers, they might just have a more positive outlook on their work environment as a whole.
Okay.
Think about a teacher who is really energized by interacting with their students,
Yeah.
their colleagues.
Yeah.
That constant positive feedback
Right.
and sense of connection, that likely reinforces their feeling of being effective,
Mm.
of making a difference in the classroom.
Yeah.
And that could explain the link to lower feelings of reduced personal accomplishment.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And their natural inclination to be social
Right.
probably means they're more likely to seek out
Yeah.
and receive social support when they're feeling stressed.
Mhm.
And that support, as we know, can be a buffer against both emotional exhaustion and the tendency to kind of withdraw and become detached.
Yeah, for sure. Especially in a job where you're interacting with people all day long.
Yeah, exactly.
Those connections must be really important. Okay, so let's go back to openness to experience.
Okay.
Because we noted that it didn't have that significant link with feeling emotionally exhausted.
Right, right.
Which makes it a bit of an outlier, but
Yeah.
it did show a significant negative correlation with both depersonalization and reduced personal accomplishment
Interesting.
with, small to nearly medium effect sizes.
Okay, so it's more selective.
Yeah.
So how do we make sense of this?
I think this is where it gets really fascinating. Teachers who are more open to new ideas, values, actions, they might be more inclined to see those inevitable challenges of teaching. Maybe it's a new curriculum. Maybe it's a difficult student behavior. Maybe it's a change in school policy, whatever, as opportunities for learning and growth,
Okay.
rather than as these insurmountable obstacles.
Right.
And this shift in perspective, that could make them less likely to develop those cynical or detached attitudes towards their students and the job itself.
Mm.
That's the depersonalization aspect. And similarly, seeing challenges as a chance to actually develop new skills, that could counteract those feelings of being ineffective or having low personal accomplishment.
Right, right.
But the fact that there wasn't a strong link with emotional exhaustion,
Yeah.
I think suggests that being open might help teachers adapt and cope in the long run, but it might not necessarily impact that immediate feeling of just being drained.
Yeah, so it's not preventing you from getting tired.
Right. It's more about how you're framing those.
That is the response, yeah.
Yeah, those challenges. And I think this is one of the areas where this focus on teachers is really important because, a lot of previous studies that looked more broadly,
Yeah, more generally.
they didn't always pick up on these kinds of distinctions.
Right, right.
Okay, so next up is agreeableness. So that tendency to be kind, cooperative, generally have a more trusting approach to others.
Right. Well, the meta-analysis found a negative relationship between agreeableness and all three burnout dimensions, with effects ranging from small to medium. But it's worth noting that there was a nearly medium-sized negative correlation with depersonalization.
So teachers who are naturally more agreeable are less likely to get kind of cynical and negative
Yeah,
toward their students and colleagues.
Well, yeah.
I mean, that seems to make sense, right?
it does.
If you're generally a warm,
Yeah.
empathetic person, you're probably less likely to develop those more detached attitudes.
Exactly, yeah.
But what about the other aspects of burnout?
Well, the study suggests that medium-sized negative correlation with reduced personal accomplishment
Yeah.
and the smaller negative correlation with emotional exhaustion, those could also be tied to the fact that agreeable teachers tend to build really positive relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Having those supportive connections with students, with colleagues, with parents, that can provide a lot of emotional support
Yeah.
and make them less prone to feeling completely burnt out and
Yes.
more likely to feel really effective in their role. So it's really about those connections,
Yeah.
that positive social exchange that seems to offer a protective effect.
Teaching can be such an isolating job
It can?
sometimes. So
Yeah.
having those connections
Excellent. Yeah,
must make a difference.
it does.
Okay, and then finally we have conscientiousness, that tendency to be organized, responsible, disciplined, goal-oriented.
Right. Well, conscientiousness also showed a negative relationship with all three burnout dimensions.
No.
Again, with small to medium effect sizes.
Okay.
And the strongest link there was a medium-sized negative correlation with reduced personal accomplishment, and then smaller negative correlations with emotional exhaustion and depersonalization.
So how does being organized and disciplined help to keep burnout at bay?
Well, the study suggests that teachers who are really high in conscientiousness, they might just be better at managing their workload, prioritizing tasks, and generally feeling in control of their professional responsibilities. And that sense of control and competence, that can directly counteract those feelings of inefficiency and low accomplishment.
Right.
Plus, their more proactive nature might lead them to actually identify and address potential stressors in their work environment before they even escalate into, full-blown emotional exhaustion or the need to detach through depersonalization.
Right.
So it's almost like their natural organizational skills
Yeah, yeah.
help them create a more sustainable and less overwhelming.
Right, right. They're kind of ahead of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, the study also looked at some other things about teachers' backgrounds, like their level of education and how long they've been teaching.
Yeah, and that's where it gets a bit tricky, actually.
Really?
They ran into a bit of a roadblock when they tried to analyze whether the level of professional education, like whether someone had a bachelor's degree or a master's degree, made a difference.
Okay.
And the reason was there just weren't enough studies that specifically looked at teachers who didn't have a university degree.
Huh. Did they speculate on why that might be?
They didn't really go into the specifics in this particular meta-analysis, but it definitely highlights a potential gap
Yeah.
in our understanding. It's possible that research has historically focused more
Yeah.
on teachers with more formal qualifications
Right.
for whatever reason.
Mm.
But, not having that data
Mm-hmm.
means we might be missing some important nuances in how personality and burnout play out for a whole group of educators.
Yeah, that's a shame.
It is. Yeah,
It would have been interesting to see.
it would have. Yeah.
What about years of experience? How long someone's been teaching?
Well, they did look at that, and interestingly, they found no significant effect of teachers' professional experience
Eh.
on the relationship between personality and burnout.
Yeah.
So basically, it seems like the way your personality traits influence your likelihood of experiencing burnout
Yeah.
doesn't really change that much as you rack up more years in the classroom.
That's interesting. I guess I would have thought that more experienced teachers.
Yeah, you'd think so.
Yeah.
Right?
You would think that they would have developed more strategies.
Yeah.
More coping skills.
Right, exactly.
Right.
But this particular data didn't support that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not just about time.
Right.
It's got to be about something else.
Yeah, it raises some interesting questions.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not just about the number of years,
Yeah.
but the types of experience.
Yeah, the quality of the experience. So,
Exactly. Or maybe the impact of personality is just so fundamental that it's not easily shifted by experience alone.
Right. Okay, so the study also makes some interesting comparisons to what's been found in other jobs when it comes to personality and burnout.
Right. They wanted to see how teachers stacked up, right?
Yeah.
And what they found was that overall, the patterns they saw in teachers were quite similar
Okay.
to what you see in meta-analyses looking at burnout across a whole range of professions.
So like what kinds of patterns?
Well, for example, the strongest links consistently showed up between neuroticism and emotional exhaustion and depersonalization,
Okay.
and between extroversion and feeling a sense of personal accomplishment, or rather, a lack of that feeling
Right.
in reduced personal accomplishment.
So even though teaching has its own kind of unique stresses, the basic connections.
Yeah, that underlying psychology seems
Yeah.
to hold up.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
Now, the study also mentioned this thing called the negative selection hypothesis in teaching.
Oh, right. Yes.
Can you explain that?
Yeah. So that basically suggests that maybe people who are drawn to teaching
Yeah.
tend to have certain personality traits
Okay.
that might make them more prone to burning out in the first place.
Like what kinds of traits?
Well, maybe higher levels of neuroticism
Right.
or lower levels of extroversion, for
Oh, it
instance.
was like they're kind of set up.
Yeah, potentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But did the study find evidence for that?
Actually, no. The meta-analysis pointed to a study that specifically looked at teachers in Germany, and they found evidence that didn't support this hypothesis.
Interesting. So at least in that context, it doesn't seem like...
Right, at least in that one study.
Yeah.
It's not like teaching is necessarily attracting people who are already kind
Yeah.
of predisposed
Right.
to burnout.
Of course. No study's perfect.
Oh, of course not.
So what were some of the main limitations that the researchers themselves pointed out?
Well, a key limitation is that they relied on self-report questionnaires to measure both personality traits and burnout.
Okay.
And that introduces something called common method bias.
Oh, right.
Because both things are being reported by the same person, there's a chance that their mood or outlook at the time they filled out the questionnaire
Yeah.
could have influenced their answers in both sections. So
Yeah.
it's possible that the relationships might be slightly stronger.
Like if you're feeling down,
Yeah.
you're going to rate everything
Exactly.
executively. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
What else?
Well, the study also acknowledges that they looked at each personality trait in isolation without really exploring how different combinations of traits might work together
Right.
to influence burnout. And our personalities, they're complex.
Yeah. Yeah.
These traits don't exist in a vacuum.
Right.
So that's definitely an area for more research down the line.
Yeah.
And of course, as we touched on earlier, that lack of data to fully explore the role of professional education. There was another limitation they faced.
Right. Okay. So we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
What would you say is the main takeaway for you?
I think the core insight for me is that our personalities, those inherent traits, they really do play a significant role in how likely we are to experience burnout as teachers across all three of those key dimensions. And what's really interesting is that these patterns, they seem to hold true in other professions as well.
Right.
So there's something fundamental going on here.
Yeah, for sure. But I think it's important for us as listeners to remember that this isn't about putting teachers in boxes.
Right, exactly.
Like trying to predict who will burn out based on some
absolutely not.
personality test.
No, not at all. I think the real value of this kind of research
Yeah.
is in helping us understand where we might be able to offer more targeted support and interventions.
Okay, like how?
Well, for example, knowing that higher neuroticism is linked to a greater risk of burnout across the board, that suggests that maybe strategies focused on managing stress and those really intense negative emotions, those could be super beneficial
Yeah.
for teachers who identify with that tendency. Similarly, for folks who are less naturally extroverted, creating more opportunities for social connection
Yeah.
and building confidence in those interactions, that might be helpful.
It almost sounds like this could inform how we train new teachers.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, or even just how we support them in those early years.
Especially in those early years. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah, because that's when they're often most vulnerable.
Now, the study was really clear that these findings shouldn't be used as a basis for, selecting teachers
Right?
based on their personality.
Absolutely not, yeah. That's a crucial point to reemphasize.
Yeah, yeah.
We just don't have enough evidence yet.
Right,
And this meta-analysis, it looked at teachers who were already in the field.
right.
So trying to use personality as the main tool for hiring,
Yeah,
that would be premature.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and could raise all sorts of ethical
Yeah.
and practical issues.
So to bring it all back together,
Mm-hmm.
what we've seen is that personality is definitely a factor in teacher burnout,
It is.
and that the patterns we see are similar to what we see in other work.
Right, across professions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think having this understanding can help us to think more creatively about how to support teachers, whether that's through more targeted interventions
Yeah.
or just by creating work environments
That
that are
are
more
more-
supportive and sustainable.
Yeah. And that leads us to an even bigger question, doesn't it? If personality plays such a consistent role in burnout across all these different demanding jobs,
Yeah.
what does that mean for how we as a society support people
Right.
in these really important but potentially draining roles?
Yeah.
How can we create workplaces that help to buffer against those burnout risks,
Right.
regardless of someone's inherent personality. It
Sure.
really makes you think beyond just the individual
Yeah.
and consider those bigger systems at play.
I think that's a great place to leave it.
Yeah, definitely food for thought.
A lot to think about.
Hmm.
Thanks.